And welcome back to Agder in the Cloud. I'm Per Torben Sørensen, and today I'm going to show you a few settings in Entra which you might want to reconsider changing from their default values. I'm going to start with identity and user settings. So I'm going to navigate to identity and user settings, and here are a few settings you might want to reconsider. One of them is restricting non-admin users from creating tenants. Now, the default is no, as you can see, and this means that any user can register a new tenant and associate to this organization. I would strongly suggest you put also yes and let the global admins do that job. There are also settings here for guest user access, but I'll come right back to that in a second. First, I want to show you this one, restrict access to Microsoft Entra Admin Center. Now, this setting is not a security setting, it is just a view filter. So by default, which is no, any user can log into the Entra ID portal and they can browse the tenant and the content, most of it at least. And it's also there they can manage any groups or resources they are owners of. However, most likely users do not have the need to log into the Entra ID portal and browse all the content, so I would suggest considering changing this one to yes. Now remember, this is only a view filter, it will not restrict access. So if you need to restrict access, you need to set up a conditional access policy for that purpose. Now, as for guest user access, I'm gonna instead move over here to the Manage External Collaboration settings. And here are also a few default settings you want to reconsider. First, we have guest user access. By default, guest users have the same access as members, meaning that they can browse the users and the groups in your tenant where they are guests. I would suggest setting it that guest users can only see the properties and membership of their own directory objects. But even more important, perhaps, is the one below it, guest invite settings. Now notice the default setting here. Anyone in the organization can invite guest users, including guests and non-admins. And that means that if you have a guest account in your tenant, that guest can invite another guest into your tenant, which you probably don't want to have happening. I would suggest putting it to either you need to be a member to invite a guest, or if you want to, restrict guest invite to only specific admin roles in your tenant, all depending on what your needs are. Now, as for groups, I'm gonna close down users, navigate to groups and group settings. In group settings in general, we can now see a few default settings. And the interesting one here is security groups, where the user can create security groups in the Azure Portal API or PowerShell, which default is yes. I don't know why an ordinary user should be allowed to do that, so I would consider changing it to no, like so. And the one below is very interesting because it's the same deal but with Microsoft 365 groups. And as you might know, a team is built upon a Microsoft 365 group. So I have a lot of customers who had quite a few issues with users creating their own teams whenever they feel like it. So if we want to restrict that, you can go into portals here and you can set the setting to no. This will remove the ability for an ordinary user to create a new team in their team clients. After groups, we have devices. So I'm going to go over to devices and all devices and device settings. Notice by default, users can join devices to Microsoft Entra. Everyone can do it. This does not apply to any type of automatic regularization like a hybrid device join or autopilot, but for the manual task of joining a device to the Entra ID, it is by default available to all of them. If you have autopilot or any other way to manage all the clients join in the system, then this setting should not be necessary. Also notice that below that if you allow users to join their devices to Entra, they do not require MFA to do so by default. And if you're going to allow users to register or join their devices to Microsoft Entra, you should absolutely consider putting on an MFA requirement. You can, of course, toggle the switch there, but as they write directly below it, strongly recommend that you do it using a conditional access policy. So last thing I want to show you is not in Entra ID by itself, but it's in Teams. So I'm going to go over to the Teams admin portal, and in meetings and meeting policies, we have the different policies for how meetings can be set up in Microsoft Teams. And one problem I've seen among many customers is that their default settings is bypassing the lobby. And I'm going to show this with the global policy here. It says, who can bypass the lobby? People in my org and guests. Now, the problem with this arises when people start up the meeting and they are waiting for some external people to join the meeting. Now, while they wait, people may tend to start talking about other things like the guests should not listen to. And without any form of a lobby, they can come straight into the meeting and start eavesdropping by accident to things that they probably should not hear. So I would also suggest considering change this setting to, like, for example, people in my organization. That way, if you're waiting for a person to join the meeting and you start talking about other stuff that the external people should not listen to, you will now get a pop-up saying that this and this person are waiting in the lobby, and you can finish the conversation or stop it before admitting them into the meeting. And that was it. Those were a few default settings in the tenant I think you should consider changing to a more appropriate value. So thank you so much for watching. I hope this was useful for you. Please subscribe to us on Agder in the Cloud, where we post blogs about anything Microsoft and IT related. And I hope to talk to you soon, and take care. Bye bye.